Well, welcome to another episode of the Pumped On Property Show, everybody. Today we've got one of our favourite clients here, Sam from Brisbane, young 21-year-old mate.
Yeah.
Congratulations on purchasing your first investment property. How do you feel?
Mate, I probably feel not as excited. Oh, no, I can't even. I don't know, pretty stoked with everything, but I think now it's just been such a process. I'm just so glad it's over, but I'm so stoked with where we're finally at with it, and I couldn't really be happier. So
yeah, well, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. Where are you from? What do you do? What sort of got you excited about property investing? Because to purchase your first home here in Australia at the age of 21 is a feat in itself. We've been working with thousands of investors over the years, talking with thousands of investors over the years, and I could probably count the amount of people at 21 on one hand that have bought properties. So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, Sam.
When I was in school, had no idea what I was going to do. Probably didn't get very awesome grades, that's for sure. But I do know that when I've sort of put my mind to something, I could get it done. But when I left school, I had no idea what I was going to do.
Yeah.
I knew someone, he's like, hey, just come work for me. That was pretty much just skilled labour. Didn't really love it, really early mornings, but I think that's when the process started. I met my first mentor there. He was one of the salesmen. He used to own the company, sold it. There's a story behind that as well. But, I was in the car for a lot of the time, starting to earn pretty decent money. And then I think I just started going what do you do with money? What do you do with it?
Yeah.
I started talking to my mentor then about, he'd float the ideas of what are you looking to do with your career and this sort of stuff. You should look at some houses and this and that, because he got started when he was early, 18 or 19 down in Sydney.
Far out.
Bought his first property, started a business 2 years later. I was like, wow, if you can do that, surely there's some way I can do something similar. So I just started smashing out podcasts in the car, because I'd be in the car for 5 hours a day.
Wow.
Driving around between these jobs and that. So I was able to just consume so much knowledge at that time.
Yeah.
And that was probably halfway through 2019 or something like that.
So did you actively seek out a mentor? Did you know once you finished uni and started work that you thought it would be a good idea to find a mentor, or did it just so happen that was the way that it unfolded?
It was just an organic growth. It just happened. I had no idea what I was looking for. Just knew I needed to earn money. And that was it. And then try and find out what I did or didn't like doing, because I didn't want to go to uni and then spend 6 months, $50,000 going, oh, that's not for me. So I was like, I'll just get a bit of life experience behind me. And a lot changed then for me as well, my perspective on work and just general life experience. I think you just grow. I think 1 year working is equivalent to 4 years in uni.
Yeah, without a doubt, man. I definitely learned more in that first year of full-time work than I did in 4 years at university. And, it's an interesting thing about life that, a lot of people go down that path, but it is good to work through that process of going through a university degree, but it's certainly not necessary in this day and age, especially when you've got your type of mindset and your desire to learn and to grow and to create a better future for yourself, because, as an investor now, you don't necessarily need a university degree. You can work towards your goal of becoming sort of a full-time investor at a super young age. But sort of bringing it back a few years, what was your upbringing like? Is your family investors, aunties, uncles, parents, colleagues, anybody like that, or?
Not massively. I think my parents are. They've got one investment property, just happened to be our old house, so I could afford to hold it when they moved through. One of my uncles, I don't think anyone in the family knows how many houses. He just goes somewhere and he likes it and he buys one. They're on the cheaper end of the scale, but he just floats around. He's a loose unit.
So it's sort of been a part of the family, but not a strategy.
It hasn't been. It's not oh yeah, my uncle really does this, or my parents really over this. It's been a lot of me teaching and growing with them as well.
Okay,
like, have
cool.
you considered doing these things? You know, you should look at doing this with the property. How are you structuring your money in that? And that's one thing. It was a bit of a taboo subject, like with money and that. Like, it wasn't really talked about much at home. Like, we talk about it. Like, you'd talk about it, but it's like, oh, don't worry. I'm like, oh, how much is this? Oh, don't worry about it. Like, I just did not know how much stuff cost.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't oblivious to it. I would always go and find out, and I was always sensitive to it. Like, I'm like, even when I was looking at birthday presents for myself when I was young, I'm like, oh, I don't want to, that's pretty expensive. Like, I kind of had a pretty good
perspective.
gauge, on it. But in terms of, like, every day, no one, well, to my knowledge, not many people in our family are, it's not like diehard investors, you know, or anything like that. So
where did it all begin for you? You finished up school, you start earning some money, you found this mentor who's asking you some unique question, which is getting your mind going. Where do you start from there? At what age are you now? About 20 or 19 or 20?
So it would have been maybe 18 and a half, about 18 and a half or something like that.
Yeah.
Started looking. I don't know, just started going through podcasts, like reading about things. We'd pretty much do like our own little whiteboard strategy sessions on like a Friday afternoon. I've clocked off, and he's like, what if you did this with your money and that? And he's like, yeah, if it's just sitting in your bank account. It was like just really basic personal finance things. He's like, yeah, if interest rate and inflation. And I'm just like, what is this dude talking about? Like, like, what is he going on about? And yeah, I think that's where it started. And then sort of looked towards advancing in my career, and I probably started trying to get a house by the time before I moved jobs, and that was the start of 2020 was when I moved to my apprenticeship. But I knew my wage was going to drop, and I started like messaging the bank and whatnot. I'm like, how do I, they weren't going to give me money at that point. There was like next to no chance. So, but that's when it started. Like, it was a pretty quick journey. Like, there was probably like 6 months of just hardcore
personal development, investment growth and knowledge and things like that. And most of that was found online through YouTube and Spotify podcasts or something like that.
Yeah. And the Pumped on Property YouTube channel was probably one of the things that I did see. Yeah. And it was just cool to find people that were like in Brisbane, because it would always be, a lot of the stuff that I first saw was in the US.
Yeah, they're the biggest channels.
Yeah, so it's always hard to find. Then, you find some in Sydney, some in Melbourne. You're like, oh man, I just wish there was people that like put this stuff out there in Brisbane, because like there's got to be a market here for that. And then I stumble across it and I'm like, oh, or if you do, there's people and they got like 6 views and it's their family that's watching it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was a Pumped on Property channel 6 years ago.
Just mum pressing replay. You got to pump the views.
Now, 2020, interesting time in the world to start thinking about buying your first investment property and getting stuck into the market. How did that year impact your decisions? Because I know we've talked a lot off camera about some of the challenges that you've had to overcome over the years. One of those being a lot of analysis paralysis, like going so deep into the information that you wanted all the answers before taking the action. So how did that sort of unfold throughout a very tumultuous year, or because you were quite young you didn't really think about it?
Yeah, I don't think much really changed in particular for me, given like my circumstances. As like, I started my apprenticeship, which is refrigeration and air conditioning. So we were considered to be, what's it called? Like a essential service or whatever. So we were still working. I was still out on the road. Everything was still sort of happening for me. But then, when everything sort of started to hit, I was like, this is exactly what, they're talking about in the books, buy when everyone's like scared and all this stuff. And then I was like, in the back of my mind, I was like, I also have this barrier. I know that my parents have got a good property here, and the other one, I want to make sure that, worst case, in my head, I was thinking I would be able to help service that if something happened to their jobs or whatever. So I didn't buy, but I was definitely looking hardcore then, because I was like, this is like what Warren Buffett says. I'm like, got to get in here. I wasn't scared about it at all, but I probably would have jumped into the wrong thing.
Sure.
I might have made a short-term gain, but I probably would be selling it now because I would have just gone, this can't last any more cycles. Let's just get rid of this.
Yeah, it's good to have that educational background and understanding different cycles at an earlier age, because then when these external situations arise, you remember those little triggers that you were taught from far more experienced investors, which helps you stick to your plan and stick to your path. So, fast forwarding a little bit throughout that process, now let's talk more about your goals in life and why you align more so with property. I know you've got an intention to become like a bit of an investor with the stock market, with property and things like that as well. So tell us about your goals in life and what you're planning to do. You're working as a refrigeration mechanic, doing your apprenticeship there, will be finished really soon. How does your job coincide with your investments? And then, what are you working towards in the short and medium and long-term future?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. So I think for me, it was just about creating the flexibility. Like, that's the main thing that I was looking to do. Like, I'd want to be able to go to work. And that, like I think I was saying before, that's the majority of people that want to buy a cash flowing investment.
Absolutely.
So they can step away when they need to, or you can take those other risks. That might be a business, that might be just, not working as much. But I think for me, I do want to make sure that I think now, like, the compounding effect is so great. I just really wanted to my short-term goal is just get as much in as I can.
Yeah.
So that later on I can sort of reap the rewards of that.
So for now, it's just a really bullish, aggressive accumulation phase, which has already begun now, and you've just sort of settled on that first investment property, which has sort of taken us about 3 to 5 months now from beginning those discussions and helping you build out the strategy and get educated on the market and then execute. But walk us through that journey of, building out the strategy, learning more about the suburbs and the suburb data that really matters when it comes to property investing, and then, inevitably ending up with a kick-ass property.
Yeah. I think for me, like, the reason that I came to you guys was because I was that analysis paralysis. So I could have, I was driving through streets, probably annoying the crap out of whoever I was with. I'm like, what the net yields average around here? And then just,
how cool is that?
And then I'm like, but I was doing that for so many suburbs. I'm like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
So I think for me, it was just good to go, I'd talk to Ben, the original ones, and he's spitting out all these numbers, and I'm like, perfect, that's what I was doing. Your problem, not mine now. Like, I don't want to think about it. So, but what was really good for me though, like, getting all the data through, and I could just logically go through there and not emotionally look at it.
Yeah.
That was, because you just want to make sure, for me, I just wanted to make sure that, like, my fundamentals were ticked. And obviously they're aligned with what you guys do. That's why I was so stoked to go with you guys. Like, my broker and that, he's like, oh, why'd you go with these guys? And like, I'd explain it. He's like, oh, right, okay, that makes sense. It all aligns. Like, that's what you want to find, is someone that aligns with, maybe your goals or your fundamentals and that sort of thing. But as far as the actual data and that's concerned, like, that was probably puts my mind at ease with those properties. Like, I don't really think about it now.
Yeah.
The property that I've got. The first couple of weeks was like pretty, hectic, dreaming about property too much and weird stuff.
Yeah.
Waking up and
long nights.
Yeah, but now I'm just like, the fundamentals are there. It's sort of out of my control now, and I could just let it go. Like, these, I get updates of finance, this ANZ saying this, CBA saying this, and it's just like, oh, well, like, keep in touch with it, but I know in the back of my mind that should be fine. Like,
yeah, and I think it comes back to the value and the goal alignment as well. You intended to be a long-term investor. Yeah. You wanted to purchase a property that was going to generate some really significant long-term capital growth and pay for itself in the meantime as well. Being an up-and-coming area, not having to overpay. So, when you've got a strategy like that and what the intentions are for the Brisbane market over the next 10 years, it helps to not get too attached to different things that'll come out in the market and just focus on your plan and your goals in life, because I think what you'll realize throughout this journey is that there is going to be a lot of external challenges, a lot of external situations that'll arise that'll, you know, put you into that fear-based mindset and things like that. And it's just important to have a really clear strategy, a really clear plan, and also a long-term intention with your strategy to, you know, detach yourself from those realities.
I think the worst thing I did as soon as I bought the property, about 2 days later, I watched The Big Short. Don't know why. Terrible idea, freaked the crap out of myself, but then a few days later I was fine. So
there you go. Yeah, that's so good to hear, man. And now that you've finished investment property number 1, and just to give everybody a little bit of context, you know, top property about 28 kilometres from the Brisbane CBD, nice big piece of land, 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, multiple incomes in that property. Pretty modern home, built like 10, 15 years ago?
2017.
Oh, bloody hell. So yeah, there you go, 5 years ago. And yeah, really kick-ass property. Already had some tenants in it as well, so you didn't have to worry about that vacancy. Now, one of the things that you mentioned off camera and just before as well is that, you know, once it's settled, there wasn't really a feeling of relief or a feeling of excitement or anything like that. Like, talk about that a little bit, about how you emotionally and energetically felt throughout that settlement process.
Well, I think, like, taking a step back, I thought I was going to be so happy. Like, I thought I was going to be telling everyone about it, like super motivated. And that's where my head was maybe 18 months ago. Like, I was so ready. You know, when I first got the bank, like the approval, I was like, yeah, I'm going to get a house soon. This is like, it's all coming to fruition. And then it just sort of like dragged out. And then when it finally settled, I was super happy, but I couldn't, it was weird. Like, I couldn't anticipate the emotion. Like, it would just be like, you know, I'm waiting for the broker to call me. Yep, finance is approved. And I was like, got really excited for about 5 minutes, and it was like, cool, okay, next thing. And then, you know, waiting for the next call, and then it finally settled, and I was just like, done.
The work is being done by that point.
Well, by settlement, like, you've already had the emotional up and down, and, you know, you found the property and is this the right one, and you've already gone through all that emotion. The last week you're just sitting there like tapping your fingers.
Very rock and roll.
Yeah, so, but I think it's more relief now. It's just like, done, first one.
You're in.
Super happy. I probably, you know, need to reflect on how I do feel a bit more. Like, that's, you know, it was such a big goal of mine. Like, it was just like, that was, you know, on my wall, this is going to happen, you know, like, but now it's like done. I've like ticked it off and started moving to the next thing, but I should probably sit back and just actually go, wow, like, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, you know, if you don't stop to smell the roses, then, you know, what are we doing all of this for? Like, you've sacrificed so much to build that deposit, and you've, you know, dove into thousands of hours of YouTube videos and educational resources to educate yourself and you know, make this decision a meaningful one and a purposeful one for yourself as well. So it is really important, but I think that's just the nature of a high achiever and a high performer is, you know, you're always going to be a little bit more future focused. You're always going to be planning for that next step. But it's just being aware that, you know, it is a huge achievement. It is like so cool that you've got such a kick-ass property at such a young age. But it's also really cool that, like, you didn't let it, you know, flare up your ego. You didn't let it become something that was like anything more than it was. You know, you have just sort of addressed it like, okay, cool, this has been a goal of mine, I've achieved that goal, you know, now let's move on to the next thing. And I think that's a really cool personality trait that you've got there as well. Yeah. So, like, what is next for you?
Well, we actually had a pretty interesting process with this property. We were about halfway through, and there was a business opportunity that came up.
Oh, yeah.
So that sort of sidetracked me for a bit there. But I think that was just another distraction along the way. That turned that down. That didn't end up going ahead. Obviously, we went with the property. But I think now it's just either get this second one or be open to any other opportunities that come up. So I definitely want to go try and get this second one as soon as I can. But I think now that I've got that first one, I can be a little bit more flexible with how I structure my personal finances.
Absolutely.
And that. Like, everything was just like funneled straight into here. So now I just want to be a bit smarter about, you know, where that money's going, what I'm doing with it, like how else can we structure this and take a little bit of a step back, use what I've learnt in the process, but yeah, definitely going again to try and get another one would be key. And with this property, one of the major things was the bank was pretty happy with this because of the cash flow with it.
Yeah.
So I know that when I go again, it shouldn't weigh too heavily on my serviceability.
No, and that was a part of the plan as well. It was getting something that wasn't going to impact you negatively for number two, because your goal in life wasn't to just buy a property. Your goal in life was to become financially free. So you've got choices, and one property wasn't going to enable you to do that. You needed a multiple property strategy. So, you know, it always starts at the beginning by going long term and going, okay, well, where do you see yourself in 10, 15 years from now? Okay, so what do we need to do next to enable us to get one step closer? And the cool thing is, and the truth of the matter is, the first investment property is always the hardest one. You know, it's when you're earning the least amount of money. It's really hard to build up that savings deposit. It's really hard to stay focused and you know, not spend any of that money, especially when it is your first time having that much cash in the bank. And then, you know, hopefully moving forward, it just compounds a little bit easier. You've got your tenants paying for your mortgage. You'll be able to increase your wage. Hopefully you get a little bit of capital growth from the property, and you can maybe use a combination of cash and equity for property number two. But, you know, now that you're also in the market, you can be a little bit more flexible with potential business opportunities or other investments as well.
I mean, for reference, like when I was saving for that initial deposit, like I was on like $13, $14 an hour.
Wow.
Like, you don't need to be earning 30, 40, 50 bucks an hour to get in.
Nah.
Like, just don't burn the candle at both ends.
Yeah.
Like if you can't create more income for yourself, then you've got to make those sacrifices. And for me, because the property was so far up my priority list, everything else was the sacrifice. So it was just like, it depends. Like, you got to weigh out what your priorities really are. Like, I was working when a lot of people had birthday parties or parties going out. It's like, sorry, man, I'm working. It's like, weren't you just at work? Yeah, now I'm working again. Like, it was just, had to try and tilt the scales in my favour, because earning $13 an hour, $14 an hour, and then going out and blowing $200 on a Friday, Saturday night was not going to get me to that number one priority spot. So
it's amazing to hear that you've been able to make those sacrifices and still remain happy in your life and everything like that. And, you know, the cool thing is now you're starting to build this knowledge and portfolio. You'll become a mentor for your friends once they get to their stage, which is normal for Australians when they're in their 30s to start thinking about investing. So, like, you know, add 10 years onto where you are right now, and a lot of your friends and colleagues will probably just be getting started, and you'll have a lot of experience. So it's a selfless thing to do what you have, even though you are focusing on setting yourself up financially, like, you know, by delaying that gratification and sacrificing so many things that nobody else at your age is doing to sort of get yourself ahead, and then, you know, support your future family, support your future friends, and you know, whatever is next to come as well. So it's important to recognize that, you know, there is like a selfless nature to those sacrifices that you've made.
Yeah, for sure. I think, what you touched on there with the delayed gratification, like, that's probably number one with what gets you there. Like, for me, that's what I found was the biggest thing. Like, if you can just, once you start saying, like, learning to say no to things to get to where you want to go, whether that's a goal or whatever that is, that was probably the biggest turning point, because that's when you start seeing those big, you know, like the compound, you've said no to this, starts getting easier to say no to other things. And then what that in turn means is the things you say yes to, you do enjoy.
Yeah,
right. So absolutely. It's like you're not just spending your time doing random things. Like, it's good to hang out with my friends, but when I do, like, I'm there hanging out with my friends. Like, I don't want to just be like on my phone chilling. And then, you know, we're at the city or something. Like, I want to be there with them, enjoying time with them. And then when I'm not with them, you know, I'm switched on doing the other things that I want to do. So being able to say no means that those times that you are there, it's quality time. And I think that's important to recognise, because a lot of people might, you know, and for me, like, I do get joy out of, like, looking through numbers and stuff like investments and that. That's what I do for fun. Like, I do enjoy that.
I'm the same.
Yeah, like, you know, like I was talking to one of my mates last week. He's like, oh man, how do you, like, do this stuff? I'm like, call it luck or whatever, but this is what I find fun, dude.
Yeah.
Like, you love working on your car, and that's sick. Like, you're really good at doing that.
Yeah.
But I enjoy doing this. I don't know why, I just do. So
it's a convenient thing to enjoy
that's what
doing.
I mean. I'm just lucky that this is the thing that I enjoy doing. Also results in, for what most people, well, you need an income, you need all that sort of thing. So I'm just lucky that reflects on those sort of necessities. It
is super convenient to have hobbies that are, income producing and going to compound over time. Now, we do have a real young audience as well, like a lot of people that are trying to get into the market, that are trying to learn. If you were to give, some other, younger investors some advice, obviously the delayed gratification is a huge one. Yeah. But what other advice would you give to people that are hoping to get into the market or are planning and starting their journey of researching property investing or financial freedom or things like that?
I think, like I said, number one is that delayed gratification, because once you know how to say no, you're gonna end up with more time and more money. That's just what's gonna happen. Yeah. So then once you've sort of had a look at that, finding a network of people can be helpful, because like we've always had a chat, it can be kind of lonely, like, people don't understand it, therefore they just don't think it's possible. Yeah. But it is. Like, definitely is. Finding that network of people, like a good mentor, just reach out to people. Yeah. Chat to people that have been there and done that. There's a lot of people online that, I wouldn't say property brokers or anything like that, but there's a lot of people that will say things, but for me it's like, look at where they are and is that a reflection of where you want to go? Yeah. But you're also going to have different friends, different mentors for different things. Like, I wouldn't, go to some people for certain things, but I'd still respect their opinion. Of course. But I want to learn from their journey. Like, that's with Ben, I found a lot of things he would say, and he's like, I probably shouldn't have done this or I should have done that. And I'm like, oh, that's cool, because that's what I was thinking of doing. It's good. It's perspective, man, and it gives you like some different ideas to think about and things to avoid as well. Because, like, did you notice that when you started asking those questions and you started seeking that advice and that support, that people were actually willing to give it to you? Man, people love talking about what they've done. Yeah. Like, people want to help you. And if you find people that have done what you want to do, they will help you. Like, they will just give you endless advice. Yeah. Take it on its merit, but like, people want to help. Yeah. So if you find people that are where you are, listen to them, listen to multiple people, and you'll probably find a common theme. Absolutely. But yeah, like, people generally want to help you out. I think it's like a human nature, like, people genuinely care about other people and people genuinely want the best for others. It's just we have all this baggage that we carry from, certain experiences or certain social situations and stuff like that, that makes us fearful for that. But, when you start going down that path, you realise that there's enough in this world for everybody to have what they want. Yeah. It's just a choice to put those habits in place to work towards getting there. So it's really inspiring to hear your story, Sam, and I really appreciate you opening up and being honest about what that journey was like. And it's going to be a nice, easy journey to financial freedom for you. Like, it's pretty fascinating to think that if you continue on this path that you're on right now, before the age of 35, you should have a 6-figure income coming in passively, rain, hail or shine. Yeah, no, it's like, I haven't forecast the numbers out and that, like we have with Ben and that before in our strategy sessions, and you just look at it and I've like got this piece of paper, like back of napkin thing, just like scribbled out, and I'm like, don't know how this works, but it does. And I'm pretty sure the idea of Amazon started on the back of a napkin. Yeah, there you go. I mean, for me, that wasn't the end goal, but it's just like, if we can just get that ticking over, then you can sort of think about other things without that stressing you out, being like, I should be doing more, or I should be doing less, I should be doing this or that. Just do. Just like literally just start. Take action. That was the biggest thing. Going back to what advice would I give maybe my younger self or someone else that's in a similar position? Just start. Like, if you don't start, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
And one of my biggest things that I say, or like that's a value for me, I have it on my wall at home, and it's progress over perfection. Because just a biggest perfectionist by nature, if I'm going to do something, I'm like, I'd have to do it properly, have to do it 100%, need to get this right. But then you find that, that might not have been worth, sometimes you're just better off starting and just, catching the wheels as they go and making it sort of just fixing it as it goes along. Like you need to just get started, man.
Yeah, you really can't fake experience, right? No. Like, taking action, going through the process, actually booking in a strategy session and going through that process, and then talking with a mortgage broker and organising pre-approval, then identifying the suburbs, identifying the property, negotiating on that, going through the building and pest. Like, you can watch as many YouTube videos, you can read as many books as you want, but it's not going to provide you with the awareness and understanding of that particular thing until you go through that process yourself.
Exactly.
And, for somebody like yourself that suffered from a little bit of analysis paralysis, to say that is probably a pretty big thing, and it definitely has some weight as well. So I would agree, experience is everything.
Yeah, exactly. So if there was 3 takeaways for someone that was in my position, or maybe me reflecting, it's A would be your delayed gratification, number 1.
Yep.
B, get started. And then, third thing would be like get your team of advisors and people that know their stuff, because then you don't need to take on the role of the lawyer, of the property, like the buyer's agent. You don't need to worry about that. Outsource the things that you're not so awesome at yet, and then learn from them in turn while you've started. Like once you start and you get those people working for you or with you, learn from them, use their experiences then. Like you don't need to spend years trying to do their job. They've been doing it, get them to do it, and you'll learn 10 times faster than on your own.
Love that, bro.
That's the biggest thing.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for that. I think that's where we'll wrap it up. Appreciate you driving up through the crazy traffic today, man. And thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think it's super inspiring to talk to somebody at such a young age that's so switched on and motivated and focused. So I really appreciate it, man. Thanks so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Can't wait to keep continuing this journey, eh?
Yeah, it's been awesome.
Thanks, bro.
Thanks.
Woo! That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Getting cool, bro. Yeah. Oh, sweaty. So sweaty. Oh, that's good. That's so nice. Oh.